Welcome to Alabama. The year is 1928. The air stands still above the cotton fields, and even the wind seems afraid to move. People here still whisper about what happened that summer, when the fields began to sing on their own. They say it started at dusk, when the last light slipped behind the magnolia trees and the rose turned silver under the moon. A hum rose from the ground, soft at first, like someone breathing beneath the soil. And the pickers, tired barefoot, their hands raw from the day, froze. Because that hum carried words, not from any hymn they knew, but from something older. Something that belonged to the land long before anyone here could name it. By sunrise, the first worker was gone. No footprints, no struggle, just her basket half full, and the cotton around it pressed flat like someone had lain there listening. They found another 2 days later, his hat resting on the edge of a furrow as if he'd stopped mid-song. The newspaper from Montgomery called it labor desertion. But the elders, the ones who had survived Reconstruction, said otherwise. They said the soil was remembering. In the stillness, they claimed you could hear it, the voices of the forgotten. Men and women whose names were lost in the Bureau's ledgers, marked fate unknown. Those who worked the same rows generations earlier and never left. Before we go further, leave a comment where you're watching from and what hour it is right now. Because this story moves differently depending on when you hear it and how the wind reaches your window tonight. A photograph survives, cracked, faded, found in a wooden frame near Montgomery. 3 field workers stand before a cabin, faces half turned from the camera. Behind them, the cotton stretches like a ghost sea. And above them, a streak of light, thin as smoke, curling like a figure in motion. The archivist called it an exposure flaw. But those who have seen the print under a lantern say the mark shifts position each time you look away. Something lived in that photograph, the same thing that lingered in the air of in 28. The preachers called it a warning. The families called it the hum. And the ones who heard it too long never heard anything else again. A field hand named Clara wrote a letter to her cousin before she vanished. It was found years later in a Bible wrapped in linen. The ground sings now. At night it says, names I don't know. Maybe they're the ones who didn't get free. Her words matched reports from decades earlier. The Freedmen's Bureau noting unexplained absences from the same plantation lands during Reconstruction. Same soil, same pattern, same silence. Locals came to believe the haunting wasn't a punishment, but a memory too heavy for the earth to carry quietly. Each year when the harvest began, the voices stirred again, not out of malice, but out of longing. They wanted to be counted. They wanted to be remembered. Old recordings from church choirs in Lowndes County captured a strange undertone in their hymns. A low vibration beneath the melody, as if another choir was singing from beneath the floorboards. Acousticians blamed the microphones, but elders said it was them, the ones whose names were left in dust. So tonight, as you listen to this, keep an ear open. Because stories like this don't die. They wait. And Alabama still breathes through those fields. Every gust of wind carries a voice. Every rustle of cotton might be a name. The spirit that haunted those fields in 1928, some say it never left. Others say it only wakes when someone remembers. Welcome to the haunting the world forgot. Welcome to the spirit that haunted the cotton fields. Before we continue, tell me in the comments, where are you listening from? And what time is it right now where you are? Because if the wind reaches your window before midnight, you might just hear it hum. The year was 1928. Deep in the heart of Alabama, where the soil ran dark as ink and the sky hung low like a lid over the earth. In the Black Belt region, the cotton still ruled everything. Land, labor, and lives. People didn't speak of ownership here, only of survival. The old plantations had new names now: Cooper Farm, Henderson Estate, Black Hollow Tract, but the work hadn't changed. Different times, same chains, only quieter. The morning light came gray and heavy, filtering through mist that smelled of soil and sweat. Cabins sat low by the tree line, rough pine boards warped from years of rain. Inside tin lamps, smoked beds were made from rope and burlap, and a single Bible lay open on the table, its pages wavy with humidity. Most couldn't read it, but they kept it close anyway, as charm as anchor, as proof that someone had written their name somewhere. Every dawn began with sound, the cough of the mules, the rattle of wagons, the slow rhythm of cotton sacks dragging across the dirt. Children followed behind barefoot, carrying water jugs. Men worked the rows till their backs curved like the stalks themselves. Women hummed hymns to keep the air from falling silent. Because silence in Alabama was dangerous. It meant something was listening. The overseers had their own rhythm boots, crunching on the ridge tally sheets folded in their pockets, eyes always measuring yield. They weren't cruel all the time, only when reminded of the numbers. Each acre had a price, each hand had a quota, and each missed bale meant another week in debt to the store that sold them their own food. A cycle so tight it left no room to breathe or to dream. But at night, the land changed. The fields shimmered under moonlight, the white cotton glowing like frost. Owls called from the far woods. The cicadas hushed suddenly completely, as if even the insects knew this hour belonged to something else. It was then the old folks said, you could hear them. The voices beneath the soil. Not cries, not screams, but a low hum that pulsed with the heartbeat of the earth itself. They said that hum had been there long before the first cotton plant grew. Before the plantations, before the fences, before the names on deeds. Some believed it was the echo of the enslaved still walking. Others said it was the land grieving for what it had seen. A woman named Lila, one of the oldest in the county, used to tell children stories by the fire. She'd point toward the horizon, where the fields met the trees, and whisper, that's where the air remembers. The ground don't forget what it's fed. When asked what she meant, she'd just shake her head and stir the coals. The 1920s were supposed to be years of progress. The Great Migration had already begun, trains leaving Montgomery, filled with those who dared to seek northern cities, carrying hope in paper suitcases. But for everyone who left, 5 remained. Bound not by chains, but by debt, by drought, by fear of what lay beyond the county line. Sharecropping, they called it. A fair deal on paper. But the papers were written by the men who owned the land. At harvest's end there was always a little shortfall, always a balance still owed. And so another year began. New crop, same promise, same lie. The churches were the only place that broke the silence. Wooden chapels on red clay hills, lit by oil lamps, filled with the sound of voices that rose like smoke. Hymns of deliverance, of Jordan rivers, and promised lands, sung not to reach heaven, but to remind earth that they were still here. Sometimes when the choir swelled, a single note would hang too long in the air, trembling, haunting. And someone in the back would whisper, they're here tonight, meaning the spirits, the ones who watched. Folklore grew like vines around those churches, stories of warning, of mercy, of reckoning. One told of a man who cut down a tree near the old plantation and found his axe dripping red sap. Another spoke of a child who wandered into the fields and returned with white dust in her hair, whispering names no one had taught her. The elders didn't dismiss these tales. They kept them alive, threading them into sermons, sewing them into songs. Because folklore here wasn't entertainment, it was survival. It carried truth where truth couldn't be spoken aloud. In the records from that year, 1928, you can find the names of the farms, the cotton yields, the rainfall totals, but nothing about the disappearances. No mention of the humming, no word of the nights when the fields refused to stay still. Yet in WPA interviews a decade later, the same stories resurface, scattered, unconnected, but unmistakable. An old man in Hale County recalls voices from the ground. A woman in Perry County remembers cotton that moved when no one touched it. A preacher near Selma swore he saw figures walking under the moon, not shadow, not man, just memory and motion. To outsiders, it was superstition. To those who lived there, it was history refusing to die. Even the animals felt it. Mules froze mid-plow. Dogs barked at nothing. Chickens went silent before storms that never came. And when the wind did rise, it didn't bring coolness. Only a strange whispering sound that passed from cabin to cabin, through fields, through sleep. By autumn, the drought worsened. Crops withered. Dust rose like smoke. The hum deepened. And some said they began to see faces in the dust clouds, eyes half open, mouths still singing. Whether imagination or truth, no one dared to answer. Because in Alabama, even the wrong kind of silence could get you noticed. And no one wanted to be noticed. At the edge of every field stood a single wooden cross, not from any grave, but from habit. The people built them to mark spots where the wind turned cold. No one buried there, no one named, but still they prayed, because you never knew when the dead might pass by. And in those nights, under a thin moon and a sky heavy with dust, the land itself seemed alive. Every shadow stretched too far, every whisper sounded like a name. Children were told not to stare too long at the cotton, not to hum back when it hummed first. But some did, and the ones who did, they said it felt like the field was breathing. The people endured as they always had. They worked, they prayed, they sang. And between each note, silence fell again. But in that silence lived something ancient, something that had never stopped moving since the first cry in bondage. It lived in the roots, in the furrows, in the air that settled low over the Black Belt Plain. So when someone disappeared, a boy, a woman, a sharecropper, it wasn't called missing. It was called taken back. Taken by the land that had once taken them all. The hum was simply its way of calling names. That was Alabama 1928. A world balanced between progress and ghosts. Where every breath carried history. Where every dawn came with the question, who will still be here by sunset? The cotton fields gleamed white under the unforgiving sun, hiding stories darker than the soil itself. And through that soil, through the roots and bones and sweat of centuries, a whisper rose again. Not asking to be heard, but daring someone finally to listen. In the archives, there is a single folder marked Henderson Plantation, 1928 to 29. Inside, nothing but 3 torn sheets. A payroll list, a weather report, and a note scribbled in pencil. Labor disruption, cause unknown. No names, no follow-up. Just those words, cause unknown, floating like dust between pages that were never meant to be read again. But elsewhere, in another file, another voice emerges. A Freedmen's Bureau agent, long before 1928, had written, "The people of this district believe the ground sings. They claim to hear voices when the harvest comes." He had underlined the phrase twice, "ground sings." Perhaps he meant it as metaphor, but metaphors have roots, and roots remember. Newspapers from Montgomery, Selma, and Mobile printed their version. Negro labor exodus, superstition to blame. One reporter described sharecroppers leaving in the night under influence of ghost rumors. He never spoke to any of them, just counted empty cabins. And when he left, the locals say the road behind him filled with mist, thick enough to erase the wagon tracks. The Selma Morning Times added, authorities dismissed tales of singing fields. No evidence supports such claims, but the same edition carried a small advertisement on the back page, a missing person notice from a landowner named Cooper Colored, male age approx. 20. Answers to Isaiah. Gone since July. Last seen at work in lower tract, a line at the bottom. Reward if found dead or alive, and next to it a grainy photograph of the cotton rows printed by mistake, the caption blurred into white. No one ever collected the reward. Meanwhile, in the oral records of the WPA, the Works Progress Administration interviews of the 1930s, old voices began to remember out loud. A woman named Pearlie Mae H. from Perry County said this, We used to sing to keep the air quiet. 'Cause if you let the quiet get too long, it'd start humming back." She laughed when she said it, but the transcript notes long pause before laughter. Another Eli Turner former field hand spoke in 1937. "One night I hear it hummin' low, same time every year. Sound like the ground breathing. I thought it was the mule, but mule was dead 3 days. When asked what he did, Eli said, 'I done nothing.' You don't answer back when the land talk first." Those voices, half memory, half warning, fill the margins of the interviews, like ghosts refusing to be edited out. They were never meant to match the Bureau's reports, yet they complete the same story. One side written in ink, the other in sound. The folklore layer begins there in the hush between the official lines. It tells of a song that could not be stopped. The elders called it the Field's Lament. It had no words, only breath and hum. They said it began when the first bale was weighed and the overseer lied about the count. From that moment, the earth began to remember injustice, and it learned how to sing. Children grew up hearing warnings, never hum alone in the fields after dark. If you hear a second voice, hum back, don't turn around. For every family had a story, a cousin, a neighbor who didn't listen. And when dawn came, their footprints circled once around the field and vanished into furrows. A schoolteacher named Sarah Jennings, one of the few literate women in Lowndes County, kept a diary in 1928. The pages, now brittle housed in the Alabama Department of Archives, are almost illegible, but a few lines stand clear. September 9th. Strange fog over the fields again. The children refused to walk the road. Said they heard a choir where no one stood. September 11th. The preacher canceled service, claimed voices in the church last night weren't ours. September 15th. The cotton hums when the wind's still. I prayed, it answered. No one knows what became of Sarah. Her school closed that winter. By spring, her name disappears from census rolls. Fact and folklore collide most clearly in one local legend, the 13th row. Sharecroppers spoke of it quietly. A stretch of field where no cotton ever grew straight, no matter how well the rows were plowed. They said it marked a burial trench dug during Reconstruction when a fever swept through the camp. The Bureau's medical logs mention no such epidemic. Yet a hand-drawn map from 1871 shows an unmarked rectangle shaded in red. Coordinates place it exactly where the 13th row would be. Locals refused to work that section. One man who did Isaiah the missing sharecropper was last seen there. After his disappearance, the plantation owners ordered the row plowed deeper to break the superstition. Workers claimed the soil bled rust-colored water for days. They stopped after finding the handle of a shovel that hadn't been made since 1870. The owner laughed, called it coincidence. But that night his cattle stampeded and the well on his property turned black. No record connects these events. No photograph proves anything. But history, sometimes, leaves fingerprints too faint for official ink. During the same period, the Freedmen's Bureau correspondence from decades prior shows a pattern of missing freed laborers recorded as relocated north. Yet letters from their families never reached them. Mail returned stamped addressee unknown. One agent noted in frustration, entire family vanished from farm. Only belongings remain. Locals cite superstition. No further action. That was dated 1873. The plantation's name, Henderson, same as 1928. The folklore says those souls never left, only waited until someone returned to the same soil. That year, 1928, they were heard again. A voice layered over time, 55 years of silence folded into a single hum. Musicologists who later studied field recordings from that region found a peculiar frequency, a resonance beneath human pitch. Not mechanical hum, not interference. A harmonic tone between 60 and 70 hertz close to the vibration of plucked wire under strain. They couldn't explain it. The technicians blamed old microphones. But the engineers noted that the hum persisted even when the equipment was powered off. The locals didn't need an explanation. They said the fields were tuning themselves a song that remembered. Folklore doesn't ask to be believed, only to be heard. And here, belief was survival. To deny what the land spoke was to risk being called by it. So the people built small protections. Bottles filled with salt and iron nails, buried at the corners of their cabins, mirrors turned to the wall at night, shoes left upside down by the door to confuse wandering spirits. And always singing, humming, keeping the air alive so silence couldn't take hold. When a thunderstorm rolled in from the west, they said, it was the ancestors marching the same rhythm as the drums of freedom that had once shaken these hills. And when the thunder stopped abruptly, that was the sign. The dead had reached the edge of the fields again. By the end of that autumn, the Montgomery Ledger reported crop failure across 5 counties. But for those who lived there, the failure had a sound, a hum that grew until even the overseers heard it. They abandoned the fields before winter. By spring, grass overtook the rows. Cabins stood empty doors swinging in the wind that finally dared to move again. And then, nothing. Silence, for decades. Until years later, the WPA interviews reopened the wound, and voices rose once more, half remembering, half confessing. One interviewer wrote in his notes, "It feels as if the ground itself listens when they speak. Between the Bureau's ink and the people's breath, the truth hums somewhere in the middle. Not seen, but felt. Not history, yet not myth. It exists in the pause after a hymn, in the shiver of the soil before rain, in the trembling of a photograph's blurred edge. And if you listen closely, really listen, you'll hear it too. That faint vibration under the story. The sound of the land remembering what the records tried to forget." Her name was Clara May Henderson, though most just called her Clara from the Ridge. 23 years old, daughter of sharecroppers. Singer in the Mount Olive Chapel Choir, a voice that could cut through the August heat and make the whole field pause. She lived in a cabin of 2 rooms and 1 window that never fully closed. When she laughed, her shoulders lifted, like she was trying to shake off the weight of the world. But when she sang, something else moved with her. Her day began before sunrise. The rooster never crowed on time out here, the cicadas did. They buzzed first, then fell silent, and that silence meant it was time to rise. She'd pour water from the tin pail cold still and hum to herself as she tied her hair back with a strip of linen. Same song every morning. Didn't my Lord deliver Daniel? Her mother said the song was a shield, that as long as she hummed it, the spirits would hum along and not against. By 6, she was in the rows, sack slung low, fingers raw. Cotton lint clung to her arms like snow. The air shimmered and the dirt baked hard enough to crack under her steps. Sometimes she swore she could hear footsteps following bare slow, a pace behind hers. But when she turned, there was only the field, stretching into forever. At midday, she'd stop to drink from the jug, her reflection trembling in the water's surface. And for a heartbeat, she'd see another face beside hers. A face darker, older eyes closed, but still watching. She'd blink, it'd be gone. So she'd drink faster, pretend nothing was wrong, and hum again, just to fill the space between her and the quiet. Clara had dreams that summer. Dreams of water where no river ran. Dreams of a house made of cotton stalks that whispered when she walked inside. Each dream ended the same, a voice saying her name 3 times. The last time from beneath the floorboards. She told the preacher once. He told her to pray harder. She told her mother. Her mother said, "Hush, baby." The land talking again. Don't answer it. But how do you not answer when something calls your name in the dark? One night she woke to rain. Or what she thought was rain. The roof was dry, the window still open. And outside the cotton swayed though no wind blew. Then came the sound, low, steady, almost human. A hum. It rose and fell like someone breathing through the earth. She pressed her hands to her ears, whispered the hymn, "Didn't my Lord deliver Daniel?" Deliver Daniel, deliver Daniel. But the hum only grew louder now, shaping words she couldn't quite make out. She remembered what her grandmother once said, "When the land sings your name, you best answer in prayer." So she knelt, she prayed, and the hum stopped, just like that. But in the silence that followed, she heard a sigh, long, deep, close, then nothing. By morning, her mother found footprints outside the cabin, small bare pressed deep into the mud. They circled the house once, then stopped under the window. The same window that never closed right. Her mother whispered a verse, drew a cross on the frame with salt water, and said nothing more. That day, Clara worked slower. Every handful of cotton felt heavier. The air was thick sweet with the smell of decay, the kind that comes before a storm. At noon, thunder rolled somewhere far away, but the sky stayed clear. The overseer rode by counting sacks, his boots coated in dust. He called her name, she didn't answer. He called again, this time the field answered back. A faint echo. Same voice, same word. He frowned, spat muttered Echo Valley, and left. But Clara stood still, staring down the row, her heart beating to the rhythm of that unseen echo. That evening, she sat on the porch, watching the horizon bleed orange. The fields looked calm. Too calm. Her father played with the radio-static gospel static again. Her mother shelled peas by lantern light. And somewhere faintly, a tune drifted not from the radio, not from the church, but from the open land. It was her song, her own humming, but distant, as if someone else had learned it and was humming it back. She froze and the radio snapped to life. A burst of static. Then a male voice distorted, saying a single word. Clara. Her father smacked the dial silence again. He laughed it off. She didn't. She couldn't. Because when she went to bed, she heard it once more, soft, slow humming, right beneath the floorboards. Weeks passed. The others began to notice strange things too. Tools missing rows, flattening overnight songs, echoing out of sync. One man swore he saw a lantern floating in the field at midnight, no one holding it. Another said he heard his dead brother call from the 13th row. The preacher organized a night of prayer candles, flickering psalms echoing through the valley. But halfway through the hymn, the candles blew out every one. And in that blackness, they heard it. The hum. Louder than ever. Not outside beneath them. They fled the church that night. Left the doors open. Never sang that hymn again. Clara stopped sleeping. She started writing. Scraps of paper tucked under her pillow, words that made no sense. Fragments like, "They waiting in the dirt," the song too heavy to hold. "When the field breathes, breathe back." Her handwriting slanted more each night until the last note, dated October 3rd, simply read, "It know me now." 3 days later, she was gone. Her sack lay at the edge of the 13th row, half full, threads torn. No footprints leading away. Only the cotton bent in a wide circle as if something had knelt there. Her mother's Bible remained open on the table pages, damp, though no rain had fallen. The bureau filed nothing. The local paper ran one line: "Colored girl missing, presumed runaway." But those who lived nearby said the nights changed after that. The hum grew softer, slower, almost gentle, as if the field had finally found what it was searching for. Years later, when the land was sold, workers claimed they still heard a voice while plowing that section. A woman's hum, faint, steady, echoing through the dirt. They said it sounded peaceful. Not like a haunting, but like a lullaby. An archivist who visited the site in the 1940s noted, "Strange resonance recorded in soil cavity. Faint vibration when wind still. Frequency below audible range." He wrote that line, packed his equipment, and left before sundown. If you walk that land now, you'll find nothing but weeds and rusted tools. No cabin, no church, no graves. But when dusk settles and the air turns heavy, the ground hums again. Sometimes a single note, sometimes a full melody. Locals call it Clara's song. They say it rises every year around harvest time. Same week she disappeared. No one remembers her face anymore, only her voice. And that perhaps is what the land wanted to keep. The record says laborer lost. The folklore says soul found. Somewhere between those lines, Clara still sings, and the field still listens. The silence after Clara's disappearance lasted 3 seasons. No one sang in the fields anymore. No one dared. Even the wind seemed careful, slipping only through cracks in the cabins, whispering, never staying long. But history has a way of documenting absence, and even silence leaves a paper trail. In 1929, the Montgomery Bureau of Labor sent an inspector to the Henderson estate. His name was Robert Langley, a northern man, educated, curious, unafraid of rumor. He stayed 3 days, wrote 6 pages, then never filed another report again. The surviving carbon copy reads, "The land remains uncultivated. Locals refuse to work past sundown. Reports of sound described as human humming persist. Residents claim it comes from beneath the soil. Instruments detect no vibration." Then at the bottom, written in faint graphite, "Heard it myself last night. Low rhythmic. Direction uncertain. Felt not heard." Langley left Alabama within the week. His personnel file lists early resignation, nervous exhaustion. He lived out the rest of his life in Ohio, never spoke of it again. But his widow, decades later, gave a letter to the state archives, sealed labeled Private 1948. When opened, it contained only one line, "I believe the dead remember more than we do." That same year, a local paper ran an unusual headline, "Unexplained Soil Disturbance," near Selma Plantation. The article mentions no names, no ghosts, only vibrations felt by workers and strange fog patterns. Photographs were taken, but never printed. When a modern researcher requested the negatives, the librarian replied, "Records missing, presumed water damaged." Yet the inventory card attached to the photo box reads in pencil Henderson. Officially, it was drought. Unofficially, the folklore said the land was stirring again. The hum that had softened after Clara vanished began to rise once more. Different now, layered like many voices at once. Men who worked nearby claimed the sound followed them home. Some said it moved through walls, through breath, through dreams. A man named Eli Turner, the same one who had once spoken to the WPA interviewer, left another testimony in 1931. "It come back after that gal gone. Louder this time. I hear men voices with hers. Some talk, some hum. Sound like they marchin'. Can't sleep when it start. Feel like the ground breathin' under the bed." He described footprints appearing overnight, in wet soil, hundreds of them, leading from the fields to the edge of the swamp and stopping there. No one followed them. They all knew better than to follow. By then, the Great Depression was spreading, and the South's papers had other crises to print. The field fell off the record. But the stories didn't stop. They simply moved inward, passed mouth to mouth, hidden behind hymns. In one church songbook from the early 1930s, a note appears beside the old hymn, "Steal Away," in small handwriting, for Clara and the ones who stayed. The music notation includes an added line, a humming refrain without words. Archivists later identified it as the same melodic pattern recorded in early spiritual field recording from Lowndes County. That same resonance, the same note that once puzzled the engineers, appears again. A sound too low for instruments, but caught by the microphone like a ghost between frequencies. When played back through modern speakers, the hum forms a pattern, 7 tones repeating every 16 seconds. Almost like breathing, almost like a call and response. The folklore layer calls this the breath of the field. It's said that every soul buried without name, without stone, contributes 1 tone to that song. Each generation that forgets adds another. And when the count reaches 7, something awakens. Stories tell of a night when that awakening came, the night of the breath. An autumn evening when the air grew so heavy, the stars disappeared. Families locked their doors, covered their mirrors, and prayed. Children woke crying, claiming to hear someone humming under their beds. And in the fields, witnesses said lights moved small, white glowing, weaving through the cotton like hands reaching out. No one died that night. But by morning the soil had shifted. Furrows realigned. The 13th row gone. No trace. Just a smooth scar of earth where it once lay. The farmers called it a miracle. The elders called it an exchange. They said the field had taken back what it was owed and given peace in return. But the hum never truly stopped. When researchers from Tuskegee visited the site in 1942 for a soil study, they recorded unusual subsurface movement vibrations in the clay, as if from underground water. Yet the field was bone dry. Their report, declassified years later, describes cyclic acoustic anomalies uncorrelated to weather or machinery. Their equipment registered the frequency 63 Hz, same as before. In the margins, one technician added, "Possible resonance from organic decay." Another replied, "Beneath it, or memory." And through it all, the folklore kept evolving, blending fact and faith until no one could tell where one ended and the other began. They told of Clara's voice guiding lost travelers home, of soldiers in World War II who heard a humming over shortwave radios. No signal, no source, just a low vibration that matched the Alabama field recordings. Some believe the spirits had followed their descendants into battle, the Phantom Regiment of the Forgotten, marching still, waiting for the roll call to finally include their names. One veteran wrote in 1946, "In the South Pacific, I heard its same tone my mother hummed to me when I was small. Same rhythm as the fields. We tuned the radio down, it stayed. It ain't gone nowhere." By the 1950s, folklorists began collecting what they called the Cotton Field Ghost Cycle. The stories varied, but the theme never changed. Voices beneath the hum, the remembrance. Some told of candles that burned blue when placed in soil from the Henderson Tract. Others of dreams where the dead appeared holding baskets of cotton hands, open not pleading but offering as if to say, "Take it, remember us." A minister from Dallas County, interviewed in 1958, described a recurring vision. "Every year near harvest I dream I'm standing in the field, wind blowing though no storm coming. I see them walking, all the lost ones, heads high, humming the same tune. They don't want vengeance. They just want to be counted." He paused. The interviewer noted tears. "I count with them now," he said. "Every sermon I call their names in silence. That's how the land stay calm." Meanwhile, university researchers tried to prove or disprove the phenomenon. Microphones buried in the soil, seismic sensors planted along the ridge. They found nothing measurable. Yet one by one the researchers admitted they felt it. Not in their ears, but in their chest. A pressure, a vibration, a heaviness that made them step back, breathe slower. One of them, a woman named Dr. Ruth Calloway, wrote in her field journal in 1963, "There is something here that mimics sound, but lives deeper than sound, as if the ground itself has lungs." She left a tape recording. The microphone captures wind cicadas, then a pause, and faintly a hum. Her voice follows, "That's not us. That's the field." She died 3 years later. Natural causes, her ashes scattered near Montgomery. Locals said the hum grew louder that night. In folklore, this is when the second layer begins, the redemption songs. Stories told not in fear, but in reverence. Where once the field's hum was warning, now it became hymn. People began to visit quietly, bringing offerings. Jars of honey-folded cloth, small crosses carved from cedar. They said the air felt softer there. That if you placed your ear to the ground, you could hear harmony voices weaving together, no longer in pain, but in peace. One woman, a gospel singer from Selma, claimed she wrote her most famous song after kneeling on that soil. She said, "It was like the earth wrote it for me. I just borrowed the tune. Her song, The Land Still Hums, became a national spiritual recorded by choirs from Chicago to New Orleans. Few knew its origin. Fewer still realized that when slowed down, the choir's hum at the end matched that same old frequency, 63 hertz, the same tone that began it all. Fact and folklore entwined until even archivists stopped trying to separate them. Because sometimes, proof and prayer speak the same language. And in that language, the field's hum became memory, not haunting, but homecoming. A recent field survey, 1971, notes the Henderson land abandoned, overgrown with pine. Yet locals still cross themselves when passing. Some leave flowers on the ditch line, whispering thank you to the air. When asked why, an old woman smiled and said, "You don't thank the dead baby, you thank the memory. That's what keep the ground from taking you too." Today, the soil rests quiet on the surface, alive beneath. The hum comes only with heavy heat or the pause before a storm. Tourists don't come here. No signs, no plaques, just the wind and the weeds and the faintest vibration when you stand still enough to listen. But those who still live nearby know. They keep the stories and the rhythm. Every harvest the church still sings, "Steal Away." They hum the extra line. They let the air tremble. And as the note fades, someone always whispers, "For Clara," and the ones who stayed, because even now, nearly a century later, the field still breathes. And sometimes, when the night is too still, you can feel the ground hum beneath your feet, a sound older than sorrow, softer than forgiveness. A song that doesn't ask to be heard, only remembered. It begins again, not in 1928 this time, but now. 100 years later. Same sky, same wind, same soil. Different machines, different maps, same hum. The story finds us not the other way around. And maybe that's how these things always work. History choosing its witness. The film reel flickers modern footage of Alabama from a drone. Cotton fields stretch endless beneath the summer haze, rivers curling like scars through red clay. But beneath that hum of cicadas and wind turbines, a faint undertone rises. A vibration the microphones shouldn't catch, but do. The narrator breathes. You hear it too, don't you? That sound under the sound. That low, steady breath of the earth. They tried again in 2022, a research team from the University of Auburn. Acoustics, geology, anthropology, all in one truck. They brought ground sensors, hydrophones, infrared EMF recorders. Their goal to debunk the persistent cultural myth known as the Henderson hum. They set up at dusk near what the locals still call the 13th row, though the soil there has long turned wild. Grass shoulder high, trees splitting through old furrows, no birds, only heat, and silence thick as syrup. Dr. Calloway's notes, preserved in digital log, begin playing. 1843. Temperature 94 DGF. Wind speed. Initial reading stable. 19 to 12. First anomalous vibration detected, frequency 63 Hz. Then, the audio cuts. The camera keeps rolling wide shot, the team standing still looking around as if hearing something. Someone whispers, "Do you feel that another?" It's not wind. Then the camera tilts just slightly, as if drawn by gravity, and the screen trembles. When analyzed later, technicians found a pulse in the waveform, 7 beats every 16 seconds. Same as before. Same as the recordings from 1930, same as the hum buried in the gospel choirs. But something different happens this time. When the pulse peaks, the mics pick up another sound, faint, melodic, unmistakably human. A voice, a woman's, singing. Didn't my Lord deliver Daniel? Then silence. The field sways through the trees beyond, stands still. The crew left within the hour. Filed no report. Only one of them, a grad student named Miles Freeman, kept his recorder running on the drive home. That recording, recovered later from his car's black box, captures his breath road noise. And a hum. He's whispering to himself, "I heard her. I heard her." The car veers. Tires skid. Impact. Static. Then, in the black, a faint female voice. "You counted me now." The footage never aired publicly, but the transcript was archived, and that's where the documentary voiceover pauses. A single breath between disbelief and reverence, because in this story there are no clean endings. Only layers, folding over time like pages that never quite close. The bridge between past and present isn't metaphor anymore. It's sound, frequency, resonance. And resonance, scientists admit, can pass through centuries like memory through blood. So maybe when the first voices sang in the fields, when the bureau agents wrote fate unknown, when Clara knelt by her window, it wasn't history ending. It was history recording, the land itself turning into archive. The camera moves through the present-day field, now handheld, unsteady, half-documentary, half-dream. Pine needles whisper. Air presses low. Somewhere faintly, a woman hums. Then a man joins, then another. Layers building. Like breath turning into chorus. No bodies here. No ghosts. Just frequency and faith. The narrator speaks again. This is what it means when people say, "The ground remembers." Not poetry. Physics. The vibration of trauma captured and replayed by the matter that once absorbed it. Stone, wood, soil, memory without mouth, still speaking. The film cuts to an old reel, 1937, a WPA interview fragment. A black preacher in a straw hat, smiling faintly, says, "Every shout got a shadow. Every song got a soul behind it. When you hear the echo, that's the one who ain't done walking yet. And maybe that's what this hum always was, the shadow of a shout still walking." Midway through editing, the producers find something strange, a photograph recovered from Langley's original folder. Black and white faded the Henderson field circa 1929. At first glance empty, but enhanced a faint blur in the center shape of a woman, head tilted, hands clasped mid-song. The caption on the back, "Light anomaly. No cause." Experts call it lens flare. Archivists disagree, because the exposure corresponds exactly to the pulse frequency recorded on site. In other words, the photo hums too. The documentary voice slows, as if each word carries weight. Some say the hum is grief. Some say it's deliverance. Maybe it's both. Maybe the two were never separate. Because that's how the land works. It keeps both sorrow and salvation in the same breath. The same soil that grew cotton grew hymns. The same wind that carried orders carried prayers. And the same silence that swallowed Clara's song now plays it back endlessly, not as warning, but as witness. At the heart of the climax, a single sequence unfolds. A reenactment filmed in darkness, only moonlight on the cotton stalks. No actors, just the voiceover and the field itself. The hum begins low. Then lights flicker across the horizon, not lanterns, not headlights. Slow pulsing glows, rising and falling like breath. A camera drone hovers, capturing what looks like mist, but inside that mist, outlines. Figures in rhythm. Marching. Hundreds of them. Silent. Synchronized. Their shapes flicker, half shadow, half memory. And in the background, a woman's voice carries above it all. Soft, clear, impossible. "Didn't my Lord deliver Daniel?" The refrain builds, joined by deeper tones, men's voices. This time, the long, slow hum of endurance. The same tone the soil has kept for 100 years. Then one by one, the figures dissolve. The mist folds back into earth, and the air falls still again. For a moment, the screen stays black. Only the hum remains steady, low, warm. Then, a heartbeat. Then another, and another, until the hum becomes rhythm, until rhythm becomes breath, until breath becomes song again. The voiceover returns softer now, almost a whisper. Maybe they were never ghosts at all. Maybe they were the record keepers. Maybe every hum, every silence, every still breath was their way of writing history into air, because not all archives live on paper. Some are written in frequency vibrations too old to fade, stories too sacred to speak outright. When we say the land is haunted, what we really mean is it remembers. And remembering is not a curse, it's a form of love. The final act of the scene unfolds like a reckoning. Historians and church elders gather near the site, a wooden cross erected, no names carved. A choir hums no words, just tone. The sound merges with the field's vibration until no one can tell where one ends and the other begins. Old and young sway together, eyes closed, no fear, only resonance. The preacher lifts his hand. This field ain't haunted, he says. It's holy. And somewhere deep beneath them, the hum answers. Soft, steady, grateful. The wind rises for the first time in months, gentle, cool, like a sigh of release. And in that breath, the voice of Clara returns one last time, not sorrowful, not lost, but whole. We remember now. Camera pans upward, drone rising the field below, shimmering silver under twilight. The hum fades into a low chord that blends with thunder miles away. Lightning flickers not blue, but warm white like old film burn. And the voiceover final line speaks what the Bureau never could write. History does not end when the witnesses die. It continues wherever the wind still carries their song. Fade to black. Silence. Then one final vibration. Faint but there. A reminder. The field is still breathing. And the story isn't finished. Dawn returns. Softly, a light that feels older than morning. The fields of Alabama shimmer pale dew on grass mist hovering low, the hum no longer audible but still felt. Somewhere under layers of soil and memory, the voices rest. Not vanished, only quieter. Nearly a century has passed since the last hand touched that cotton. The cabins have collapsed. The wooden chapel is gone, only its foundation stones remain pressed deep into the earth like vertebrae of something once alive. And yet, the land still feels watched, listened to, protected. If you stand there now, just before sunrise, you can hear the echo of work. Not mechanical, not imagined, but the steady rhythm of sacks dragging across dirt, the faint breath of those who once sang against silence. Every sound in that place carries weight, every silence a name. The state archives hold 12 boxes labeled Henderson Tract. Inside, rusted nails, soil samples, photographs too damaged to restore. But one envelope sits apart stamped "Do Not Destroy." Inside, a reel of tape unmarked. When played, it begins with static. Then, the hum. Low, constant. Not haunting, not sorrowful, almost tender, as if the earth itself were breathing beneath the microphone. No one knows who recorded it. Some say it was the Bureau man. Others say it was Clara's mother, who lived long enough to buy back a piece of the land she once worked. She never farmed it, just sat on the porch, rocking, listening. Neighbors said they saw her smile some evenings, as if hearing a choir only she could hear. She died with that smile still on her face. Years later, when historians tried to trace the song's origin, they found the melody woven into 100 other recordings, blues in the Delta Gospel in Chicago, even a protest march in 1965. Same tone, same hum beneath the words. Different names, same inheritance. A legacy buried in rhythm, because sound travels further than blood. It carries through generations, through grief, through struggle, and always returns home. A musician who visited the site in 1987 said this: "It ain't ghosts out there, it's memory tuning itself." He sampled the field's vibration, turned it into a bass line for a song called "The Ground Remembers." It played once on a local station before static cut the transmission. But for 30 seconds, the air across Lowndes County vibrated with that same note, the hum, rising again. The film shows new footage, slow, quiet shots of modern Alabama. Children running through open grass. A church rebuilt on a hill, its bell newly cast from melted iron salvaged from the ruins of the old Henderson tools. Every Sunday they ring it once, and when the last tone fades, people say they hear another lower note that follows after, as if the earth answering. That's what survival sounds like here, not loud, not triumphant, but steady. The narrator's voice lowers. Some stories end with closure, others with silence. But this one ends with a hum, a sound too ancient to die. The folklore calls it the breath eternal, a final stage where haunting becomes harmony, where the voices no longer seek recognition, only remembrance. People who come here now don't ask questions, they listen. They bring small offerings, jars of soil, handwritten names of ancestors, pieces of fabric tied to the fence. And when the wind shifts, those ribbons move together, whispering in rhythm like the pages of a book being turned by unseen hands. It's said that once a year, near harvest season, the hum returns strongest. It comes with the smell of rain on clay, with thunder far away, with hearts that remember even when minds forget. Sometimes the sound drifts all the way to the churchyard. Sometimes it reaches the road. And sometimes, if you're very still, it follows you home. In one of the final interviews, an old woman, eyes clouded but clear in spirit, sits beneath a porch light and says, "They ain't gone. They just learned how to rest." Her hand trembles as she adds, "We keep talking, keep singing so they don't gotta come back no more." And maybe that's the truest kind of peace, not forgetting the dead, but letting them sleep in the sound that carried them. The camera drifts upward again from the porch to the trees, from the trees to the horizon, where the early sun glows through a veil of mist. The color turns gold, then white, like old film burning. A voice rises faintly under the narrator, Clara's song now woven with the choir of present-day Alabama. Didn't my Lord deliver Daniel? Deliver Daniel. Deliver Daniel. The chorus fades, the hum lingers. You can feel it in the chest, not the ear. A heartbeat that doesn't belong to the living or the dead, but to the land itself. And the voiceover, the final whisper, closes the circle. Every generation inherits a silence. Ours is to fill it not with noise, but with listening. To remember what the wind once carried, and what it still carries even now. The music fades, only natural sound remains: the breeze, the distant bell, the faint tremor of the ground. Then a line appears on screen, simple white letters against black. 1928, Alabama. The spirit that haunted the cotton fields, a legacy no longer buried. Before you go, tell us where you're listening from, and what time it is when the wind reaches you. Because somewhere, between your breath and the next heartbeat, the field might be listening too. Fade out. Silence and the faintest hum, just enough to remind you the story never truly ended.